There is an innocent mistake that I see so many women making when it comes to their health, and most of the time they don't even realize it's happening, and they also aren't aware of the consequences that can arise when it's happening. This one thing can contribute to fatigue, recovery challenges, hormonal imbalances, cycle irregularities, or even missing cycles, challenges conceiving, sleep problems, thyroid issues, anxiety, and surprisingly weight challenges, blood sugar dysregulation, and so much more. One of the biggest realizations that I had when I started working with women, and this is women of all ages, not just a certain age range, and doing their personalized nutrition audits and diving into the functional labs that I run in practice, is how incredibly common it is for women to be underfueled. In this video, I want to walk you through the different ways that women can be underfueled, because this is not just limited to not eating enough calories. I'll talk about how the body uses the types of food that we eat, the times that we eat, and the amount of food that we eat as fundamental signals of safety. I'll talk about what actually happens in the body when it is underfueled chronically. We'll explore the great women's health debate of whether to fast or not to fast, and most importantly, the simple supportive steps that you can take to better fuel and nourish your body so that you can feel your best. I'm Jacqueline Miller. I'm a women's functional health practitioner and the founder of Rad Wellbeing, which is a women's functional wellness and holistic health practice. Rad Wellbeing was created, simply put, to help women live radically well. And my aim with these videos is to provide women with fresh perspective, practical education, and a deeper sense of agency around their health and their lives. In practice, I work with women in their mid-20s through mid-70s to help them gain clarity and empowerment around what their unique bodies need to thrive. So if you're craving fresh perspective, clarity, and empowerment around your health and your life, keep listening. So to start, let's talk about what fueling actually means. When I use the words food and fuel in this video, I'm using them intentionally and interchangeably, because the food that we eat, meaning the quality, type, timing, and amount, is not just nutrition, it's information. You can think of food as a communication system between you and your body. Every time you eat, you're sending signals that influence hormone signaling, energy production, blood sugar regulation, nervous system tone, immune function, and so much more. I've touched on this in a few of my other videos, but it's helpful to remember that our body is a brilliant and sophisticated signal interpretation system. We have signals coming in from our external environment, signals coming in from our internal environment, so within the body, and then the signals that we have control over sending. Those are the decisions that we make in each moment and day for our body. Things like the amount of rest that we get, how much we move, the habits we build into our lives, and the way that we fuel ourselves with food. If there's anything I want to shape or help you understand more clearly in this video, it's looking at fuel fundamentally as a safety signal to the body. When we don't eat enough, even if it's innocent and unintentional, that is simply put going to create signals of lack of safety and ultimately stress within the body. And I don't mean stressed in the way that we think about it mentally or emotionally. I mean stressed at a cellular, physiological level. Every once in a while, this is not the end of the world, and of course the body can adapt and recover because it's brilliant. But when this is chronic and ongoing, naturally the body is going to shift into a mode of being under-resourced and therefore stressed. And this can create a domino effect into virtually every system in the body. Conversely, when we are properly fueling and nourishing ourselves, the body is able to sense safety and adequate resources coming in. And that is what allows the body to do what it was designed to do. So again, quality, amount, type, and timing of the foods we eat are direct communications to the body to help it function as it was designed to function. Looking at this at a deeper level or almost energetic level, the way that we eat and eating enough to properly support and sustain our body is, simply put, a deep sign of care. It's letting the body know that we have the intention to care for it, to nourish it, to give it what it needs to thrive. And so when we're eating low quality foods that don't truly fuel us, or not eating enough, or just innocently eating in ways that don't serve us or even deprive us, the body can interpret this as a signal that we don't care. And naturally, this is when symptoms or uncomfortable states can arise. This is the body's way of trying to get our attention and trying to get us to care. One of the fundamental beliefs that I work with, that I've touched on in other videos, is that the body is always trying to work on our behalf. It wants to be in partnership, and it's always trying to do the very best that it can with the resources that it's given. And when it starts to break down or symptoms start to arise, that can simply be a signal for us, similar to a check engine light, that we need to better care for the body and better resource it. And food or fuel is one of the most important ways that we can do that. Before going further, I want to share an important, compassionate note and be very clear that this conversation is not about eating disorders, intentional restriction, or blame. Many women I work with are underfueled unintentionally. They are busy, caretaking, stressed, juggling many facets of life, or following wellness advice that simply wasn't designed with female physiology in mind. So if disordered eating or an eating disorder is part of your lived experience, this topic absolutely deserves additional care, and the information that I'm sharing is in no way intended to be unsupported or activating. I've worked with women recovering from eating disorders and disordered eating, and I have the deepest compassion and respect for women on their healing journeys around food and fueling. So if this topic feels tender for you, I invite you to listen slowly, take what feels supportive, and leave anything that doesn't. And if you are actively healing your relationship with food, working with a qualified practitioner who can support you one-on-one is very important. I touched on this at the beginning, but some of the most common manifestations or symptoms that I see when women are underfueled are, of course, low energy. Infertility is a big one. I really want women who are trying to conceive or planning to conceive understand that the body must have a fundamental sense of safety and a sense of being resourced energetically before conceiving. And when we chronically undereat, that sense of safety and adequate energy, those signals aren't there. So naturally, and actually brilliantly, the body can decide that this is not a safe time to procreate. I also see a lot of thyroid issues with underfueling. Again, the thyroid has to sense adequate fuel coming in order to do its job. I'll see irregular cycles or even amenorrhea if underfueling is really on the extreme side. Poor sleep is huge. Migraines, anxiety, blood sugar dysregulation, which can actually be a compensatory mechanism when we aren't eating enough. In menopausal women, I can see underfueling contribute to exaggerated sarcopenia or muscle loss, which can in turn contribute to osteoporosis and so much more. What's really important to take away here is that if a woman is truly underfueled, the way that it may impact her symptomatically is so vast and broad because, again, being properly fueled is one of the foundations of physical health. And if that foundation isn't properly poured, the impacts can show up nearly anywhere. Now, here's a critical piece. Underfueling does not always look like, quote unquote, not eating enough calories. Calories are simply units of energy, but energy quality matters. While not eating enough calories is absolutely one form of underfueling, a woman can be taking in enough calories, but still technically be underfueled if the types of energy that she's taking in are not the right balance of energy for her body. When it comes to food, we have three basic types of energy called macronutrients, and those are carbohydrates, protein, and fat, which most people are familiar with, none of which are inherently bad. I can't stress that enough. Carbohydrates in particular have been unfairly demonized in women's health spaces, and I want to be very clear that carbs are not the enemy for women. They are in fact very important. Each type of macronutrient or type of fuel plays a unique role, and as humans, we were designed to need and thrive off all three types of energy. So underfueling can happen when one or more of these fuel types is consistently missing or inadequate. I often see women eating very low carb, higher fat diets, thinking they're doing the right thing, yet their labs and symptoms tell a very different story. Some women are just innocently under eating. I've seen some labs that nearly look like those of a woman in a recovery from an eating disorder that think that they're taking in enough fuel because they just don't feel hungry. But upon further inspection, they have a glaring need for more fuel. I've seen this very often in long-term intermittent fasters, which I'll share more on in just a moment. There are also many women who lean on quick burning, what are called simple carbohydrates, so sugary foods, starches, snacky foods, baked goods, a lot of things with added sugar, etc., as their primary fuel while way under eating protein and nourishing fats. And this can start to tip the scales in a different direction in the body. Very often I'll see this end up manifesting as insulin resistance, which is ultimately too much stored energy or too much stored sugar in the body. This can come with its own whole cascade of negative effects on the body, which I'll be talking about at another time. But an alternative perspective that I have on insulin resistance is that even though there is often an overabundance of stored energy or that stored sugar in the body, I still fundamentally view this as a woman being underfueled because she's underfueled of the nutrient-dense foods that truly nourish and sustain her body. And that can still act as a stressor signal within the body despite eating enough or often overeating calorically. We can also end up underfueling due to the times that we are eating or not eating. Hands down, the biggest area that I see this in practice is skipping breakfast, and I cannot stress how important this is to consider. As women, we have to know that the timing of fueling our body, meaning the times that we eat, is mission critical to helping our hormones align and behave in the rhythm that they were designed to. Our hormones work in orchestrated pulses, and our fuel timing has to align to support that. This fuel timing conversation brings us to a very important exploration that I want to touch on, which is the great fasting debate as it pertains to women's health. Out of all the clickbaity, staunch, black and white messaging that I've seen in this space, fasting sits right at the top in terms of confusion and polarization around what is actually supportive for women's bodies. A lot of this conversation tends to funnel down to two very big names in women's health, Dr. Mindy Pelz and Dr. Stacy Sims, both of whom I believe have well-researched and valid perspectives. And at the same time, like so many things in human health, I don't believe the truth lives at either extreme. I really do not like panacea messaging, which is what I think a lot of the fasting messaging falls into. So, i.e., do this and it will fix everything. Bodies don't work that way. Hormones don't work that way. And women's bodies certainly don't work that way. Every woman has a different baseline, different metabolic health, different hormonal terrain, different stress load, different physical training demands, different life circumstances. And whether fasting is supportive or disruptive depends entirely on who that woman is and what her body is currently navigating. I'm sharing my own perspective of what I've seen in practice here, and I'm not saying that either of these perspectives are inherently wrong, but what people don't like to acknowledge when it comes to this type of conversation is that there is an immense amount of nuance and individual context involved. The social media space is rewarded for being black and white and controversial, and unfortunately, that makes it highly inconvenient for the reality of nuance and individualization that is always present in women's health. So I think that for women who are insulin resistant or pre-diabetic or diabetic, have elements of metabolic syndrome, or who aren't engaging in higher output training, meaning workouts, may at times respond positively to more structured fasting protocols. But I think that for many other women, especially women who are consistently physically training, who have navigated periods of life with cycle dysregulation or missing cycles, or who simply carry stress loads, which most women do, whether at work, family, poor sleep, or other areas of life, prolonged fasting can often be far less supportive than helpful for the body, especially when it comes to our hormones. I personally view a 12-hour overnight fast not as intermittent fasting or prolonged fasting, but as a natural, biologically aligned fast, so one that supports circadian rhythm and basic metabolic regulation without pushing the body into a deeper stress response. When we move beyond that basic 12-hour fast, so skipping breakfast, delaying fuel deep into the morning, doing fasted workouts, we have to understand that what the body is experiencing physiologically. Cortisol naturally peaks in the morning as part of our normal biology. This is known as the cortisol awakening response. When we don't eat during this window, the body can interpret that as an added stress signal, essentially communicating that resources are scarce at a time when demand is already very high. For many women, this amplifies cortisol drive throughout the day and increases sympathetic nervous system activation, something most women already have too much of. And when we don't eat during this window, we're innocently telling the body that we don't care about it being resourced during a time of biological stress. Women are more sensitive to this particular kind of metabolic stress than men, particularly when it comes to hormonal signaling. And over time, this can show up as increased anxiety, burnout, strong afternoon crashes, disrupted cycles, sleep issues, and paradoxically greater difficulty losing weight, because when the body perceives a chronic stress state, it doesn't feel safe to release resources. It works to conserve them, and that often means holding on to stored energy, including body fat. So generally speaking, for most women, it can be a very helpful practice to implement a natural, gentle 12-hour fast and then focus diligently on getting fuel within the first hour of waking, particularly for hormone and nervous system stabilization. If metabolic health is compromised, so again, like in the states of insulin resistance, pre-diabetes, or metabolic syndrome, longer fasting can be considered, but this is all about whether it's appropriate for your unique body in this season, given your biology, your current stress load as a whole. This is where working with a seasoned practitioner versus relying on a social media reel to guide your health decisions can be extremely valuable. There are two other important fuel caveats that I want to share here. Number one, for cycling women, it's also important to understand that your fuel needs are not static across the month. Your hormones shift throughout your cycle, and with them, your energy demands shift as well. In the follicular phase, so after your period ends and leading up to ovulation, many women naturally feel more energized, more resilient, more insulin sensitive, and fuel needs are often slightly lower here because the body is quite resourced hormonally, and the body tends to tolerate lighter meals or longer gaps between meals a little bit more easily. But in the late luteal phase, so that week or so before your period and during your bleed, the body's energy demands increase. Progesterone is higher, metabolic rate rises, body temperature increases, and the body is actively preparing for either pregnancy or menstruation. This is a time when eating more is not only normal, it's necessary. The kicker is that this is often the phase when women try to tighten control. They'll eat less, they'll push harder, they'll ignore hunger or be good. And that mismatch alone can create symptoms like increased cravings, fatigue, mood changes, poor sleep, blood sugar instability, etc. So eating more during your late luteal and during your period is not a lack of discipline, it's a response to increased physiological demand. Fuel needs also shift significantly for women who are engaging in more intense or frequent training. Exercise itself is a stressor, even when it's a positive one or a hormetic stressor, meaning one that helps us adapt and grow. And when training demand increases without a matching increase in fuel, the body doesn't interpret that as getting stronger. It interprets it as being under-resourced. So this is another common pattern I see in practice is women training hard, eating clean, but not eating enough to meet the combined demands of exercise, work, life, stress, and recovery. When fuel doesn't match training load, we often see symptoms like stalled progress, poor recovery, sleep disruption, cycle irregularities, thyroid downregulation, heightened anxiety, or that familiar kind of wired but tired state. So for women who are training hard and consistently, adequate carbohydrate intake becomes especially important to support glycogen replenishment, hormone signaling, and nervous system balance. And protein needs also increase to support tissue repair, muscle building, and metabolic health. More training requires more fuel, not just on workout days, but consistently. And when fuel rises alongside training demand, the body is far more likely to adapt positively rather than shift into that stress protective mode. So with this groundwork and deepened understanding being poured, I want to leave you with 4 simple steps to take to better fuel your body. Number 1 is implementing that foundational, simple 12-hour fast that I mentioned earlier. Again, my personal perspective is that a 12-hour fast doesn't constitute prolonged fasting. It simply falls in line with our natural, inherent biological design and matches our circadian rhythm. It's basic and natural to stop eating when the sun goes down, so after dinner, and eat when the sun rises, shortly after waking, not a few hours after waking. As women, we typically have greater energy needs and demand earlier in the day, so eating a larger breakfast and lunch and then a slightly smaller dinner is also very much aligned with our basic biology. For most women, the lock and key to making that 12-hour fast happen is cutting out after dinner snacking. So fuel intake for the day stops with dinner, say around 6:30 p.m., and begins within an hour of waking the following morning, which is around 6:30 or 7 a.m. Number 2 is implementing that first hour fuel. So as I've already touched on, women have significant energy demands that are translated into hormonal communication, particularly in the morning after waking. Cortisol is typically surging at its highest within those first 90 minutes of waking, and that again is called the cortisol awakening response. And ultimately, we are in a natural biological stress state during that time due to that hormonal peak. So what does the body look for when it's stressed is fuel. So eating during that window, ideally an hour after waking, helps the body receive the message that it is resourced, i.e. fueled, and that can help balance out those peak stress hormones and the nervous system response that comes with it. I mentioned Dr. Stacy Sims earlier, and her research has helped guide much of this perspective, but what research generally points to during that hour is a simple fuel intake. It does not have to be a huge breakfast, typically around 200 calories, focused on protein, so around 20 grams of protein with some slow-burning carbohydrates. I provide my clients in practice specific ideas to work with here based on the woman and what her unique needs are, but some super simple ideas here would be a basic protein shake that does have some carbohydrates included. I love the Body Health Power Meal Shake in practice. There are a lot of nuances to consider with protein shakes, whether quality of protein used, heavy metal content, added sugar. There's so many things to think about, and I'm very picky about what I recommend here. Or another simple option that I love are Jacob bars. And I'm not normally an advocate for bars, as again, there are a lot of nuances to them, whether low quality filler ingredients, too much added sugar, not enough protein, etc. But Jacob bars are the most nutritionally dense and blood sugar stable protein bars that I've found with one of the most simple ingredients lists that I've seen. Number 3 is pretty basic, but deserves being mentioned, which is just don't skip meals. One of the most common ways women end up underfueled is simply by skipping meals. And again, this often happens unintentionally. This usually isn't about dieting. It's about being busy and being in meetings and caretaking and running on adrenaline or telling ourselves we'll just eat later. But from the body's perspective, long gaps without fuel register as uncertainty and stress. And regular meals are one of the simplest ways to stabilize blood sugar, calm the nervous system, and support that hormone signaling throughout the day. When meals are skipped, we're much more likely to see energy crashes, irritability, anxiety, strong late day hunger, poor sleep, and increased cortisol drive, which spills into so many areas of health. So you don't need perfect meals, you need consistent meals. Even a simple, imperfect meal is far more supportive than no meal at all. And lastly, number 4 is to include protein and fiber in every meal. Protein and fiber are 2 of the most underconsumed and most impactful nutrients and building blocks for women. Protein provides the building blocks for hormones, neurotransmitters, which are brain chemicals, enzymes, muscle, bone, our detox pathways. And for most women, aiming for a minimum of 30 grams of protein per meal is what's going to help support stable blood sugar, sustained energy, brain health, fullness, and metabolic health. Fiber is ideally around 40 to 50 grams per day, and that supports our gut health in many different facets, our hormone clearance, blood sugar regulation, and the microbiome, again, in many different ways. It also helps slow the absorption of carbohydrates, which creates steadier energy and fewer crashes. So when protein and fiber are present at meals, the body receives a very clear message that quality fuel is coming in steadily, resources are sufficient, and there's no need to overactivate our stress pathways. This doesn't have to be complicated or rigid. Just start by asking one simple question at each meal, which is where's the protein and where's the fiber? And when those 2 are consistently in place, everything else tends to become much easier to regulate. So there is a lot of other nuance involved to truly personalize nutrition and fueling needs for each woman. This is one of the significant focuses of my work with women in practice. But most women can benefit immensely from implementing these simple steps. And as always, my recommendation is simply to start by focusing on one thing, build from there, and I'm confident that as you do, you'll reap the benefits of your body feeling safe, resourced, and properly fueled. If you've enjoyed this video or found this supportive, be sure to like, subscribe, or share with anyone that you love. And you can always learn more about Rad Wellbeing and how to work together and deepen your support by visiting my website, which is linked below. I hope to see you back here for future videos.